Hey, James, I think your mic isn't on.
Is that better? Who texted you? No.
That sounds better, yes.
Okay, good. Well, then I'll just kind of start over. I'll do it better this time. Anyway, so we are coming back through. Now we have, completed our results table and we have completed our flowchart, and that creates the basic components of now our results. So we've completed the study. From there, now we also have to complete the results section of our manuscript, because each of these need to stand alone, right? We need to have the results flowchart, the results table, and the manuscript section stand alone. So we go to our Prisma checklist. Start with study selection. This is going to be describing now the flowchart in words. So we're going to just pretty much take the flowchart, put it into sentence format for each step. This is also where we will give the specific reasons for exclusion. Yep.
Okay, so when I'm looking at the examples,
Yeah.
they like give the references for some of their views for excluding, obviously not all of them.
Yep. So you are required. So if you were able, and the assumption is if you were able, then everyone else would be able to as well. Eliminate the article without having to read the article. Then it's obvious based on the title and abstract that it's not includable. In those cases, at most, you need to provide general reasons. It's nice for the reader to go, yeah, I eliminated 50 articles based on title and abstract, and for the most part, it was because they all had to do with chronic pain and we're looking at acute pain, all right? Something like that. If it's not blatantly obvious why it needs to be excluded, right? You had to go look at the full text and really examine whether or not it met your inclusion criteria. Those are the ones then that need to have reasons. So if you had to pull the full text to figure it out, the assumption is that it's not blatantly obvious that it needs to be excluded. Therefore, we're going to provide the reasons. So long answer to that. But basically, the short answer is if it's not blatantly obvious to you and therefore to the readers, you need to give the specific reason. And you're going to go through and do that in a linked format. And what I mean by that is you do not want a sentence per article. In fact, if we could get by with one or maybe two sentences at most, where we say something like, 15 articles were screened for full text inclusion. 5 of those were excluded due to starting with the letter A, right? and 2 were excluded for starting with letter C, thereby leaving 8 articles for included in our qualitative analysis. All right, so you want to block those together. So if you have, and that's why, going back, take your piles if you printed them off with the reasons written on top and categorize them. You know, start with the most. If there are 3 articles that you excluded because they did not include your patient population, right? Then those 3 are all going to be cited for not having the correct patient population. And so that's the first paragraph describing your results. In some of the examples, take a look at some of the examples. They moved that into the methods section. That's kind of an way that some authors have done it. It's acceptable in both ways, but by definition, these are results. It just doesn't make any sense that these are results yet, but they are in fact results. So if you're looking at some of the examples, and the first paragraph is not about the number of articles, it's probably the last paragraph in the methods, or second to last, because they probably have that little bias paragraph that we included in there. That seems, that'd be a decline, right? Anyway, so that's the first paragraph. The second paragraph is now where you are going to describe the studies that you are including. Now, this is very different from analyzing the studies that you have included. This includes none of your opinions. It includes none of the relevance. All it does is take the results table and put it into words. That's the key. Anytime when you're writing these results, just go back and think, am I, going beyond the flow chart and the results table? And if such, keep that thought. We're just going to move it to the discussion. So you are going to make very factual statements in this next paragraph, right, on the study characteristics and results of individual studies. This is the next paragraph. As I stated, we are not going to have synthesis of results and this risk of bias within studies. I just kind of throw that up in the study characteristics. Right? Yes.
So one time I excluded including the own study. I just included the information that's relevant. I need to include all the information.
No.
Discussion.
Nope. So question is about whether or not you need to include additional information from the studies that aren't relevant to your systematic review. And I look at that as oftentimes a paper is actually answering multiple clinical questions or is going beyond that. You only need the portion that applies to you. So I use the example of you might be interested in the effects of, we'll go back to dry needling and hamstring range of motion. And you might be interested in that. And so, but they did 3 groups. They had dry needling and hamstring range of motion. They had a control group, and then they had an ultrasound group. For the purpose of us, the ultrasound group might as well not exist, right? Because we would still use that research study if the ultrasound group was not there, right? And we're not going to include that. And so you can have that. Oftentimes you'll see multiple intervention types. Now, a caveat to that is, let's say they did 2 different dry needling techniques in the same study. Then you would almost count that as 2 separate studies with that, right? You would still report it on a single line in your results table, but because they now have a group, or they still have 3 groups, but 2 of them are dry needle groups and 1's control group, you almost have 2 different comparisons. And so you will end up citing that research probably in multiple areas, because you might, in your study characteristics, you're going to now go through that same group of papers, right? And I would start with, okay, let's look at subject characteristics. That's the easiest. Let's group these pieces of paper, right? You only have 1 group of piece of paper. If there are multiple groups within that, you could even print it out twice for each group. But you're going to say, okay, for subject characteristics, here's a pile that has college-age people. Here's a pile that has, all sorts of different ages. And here's a pile with just old people. You could then make a statement that describes the subject populations along the lines of, subjects within the included, or the results of studies, whatever, some sort of thing in there, has subjects ranging from all ages, right? And then cite those articles, to specifically college-age individuals, cite those, to elderly individuals, cite those, period. So you're describing your entire results based on the subject. Then move to the next section on your results table. Move to the next section, move to the next section. And you are describing your results table by column. Do not cite or do not describe your results section by row. Does that make sense? Column means multiple research studies on a single area of that study. Row would be if you just described the research study. Row bad, column good. So within there, your risk of bias is going to be included in like your Pedro score. If you saw any bias things, you saw that it was fun, that your dry needling research was funded by a company that makes dry needling skills or tests people or whatever, right? That would be a potential bias. Right? Because even though, there are things that go through, it's just a potential. It's not life altering. It's not that it can't be bad. You can have good research funded, by individuals that just need to know. That doesn't mean that they're, creating a problem, but it's possible. So anything in that area you can include within your Pedro score. Otherwise, your risk of bias is going to be described by primarily looking at the internal validity of the study, which is what the Pedro score does. So depending on whether or not you think that information is going to be particularly relevant to your readers, right? You have some studies that were done very well and some studies that were not. And the studies that were performed very well, high Pedro scores, right, said one thing and the lower Pedro score said another. In that case, you would want to describe a little bit more than just the scores. Right, so you might describe that 3 studies had Pedro scores of, 8 and 9, cite those. However, 5 of the studies had Pedro scores below 7, most of them missing blinding, right? So describing why that was important. And the reason for that is because that's something you may want to talk about in the future. If there's nothing really there, you can just basically state in a sentence, the range of Pedro scores are, here's the range. And you would not need to cite that because you're just describing the range of all of them. All right, so if you find yourself, you know, like in that case, trying to cite all of the studies in your results table, double check to see if you're really referencing those articles or you're referencing yourself. The last part then within that is going to be this risk of bias across studies type thing. And if you remember, we stated that there's the possibility of this thing called publication bias or negative bias, in which case it is more difficult to get results that say stuff does not work or there is no difference published, because basically it says that we know what we knew before, more or less. And that's not nearly as sexy for journals to publish. So if we have an absence or an absence of negative studies, or we have similar numbers in studies between positive and negative results, we're going to make some comment about what we found. The comment is usually fairly similar to the initial comment you made in your methods. The important part then is when you do your discussion to actually include that in your thought process. And we will discuss that more when we obviously get to the discussion. So when we look at this section of the paper, it should be relatively straightforward from your results table and your flow chart. You just need to combine those areas based on those columns for the second paragraph and write out the process, including your reasons from the first paragraph from the flow chart. Repeating myself, keys are to make sure that you are staying within the charts themselves, not trying to go off and make applications. That's probably the biggest error that people do, is they start to try to interpret stuff. These are just the results. This is what you found, not what it means. And then the second thing is, this is where brevity is truly next to godliness. We want to know what you found in the least number of words necessary. The entire purpose of your review is to describe what you found without me having to read it for myself. If we get long-winded in this instance, we're decreasing our effectiveness for our reader. The way you do that is columns, not rows. If there is something really special about one article, right, we will discuss that in the discussion. But right now, basically, all articles in our results are created equal. So in our results table, right, it's set up with columns are like study characteristics, all that. Discuss the column and one thing, not the row. So don't discuss one article and talk about all the different components in that article. Talk about all the subject characteristics. Yes. Ideally, well, I mean, it should be about 2.5 paragraphs. Hopefully you can get I mean, it should be about a sentence, maybe 2 sentences for each step or each column. That should be all you should need. It's going to be fairly listy in its format, and that is okay. We are simply describing a chart. If they want to know more specifics, you know, like the very specific intervention, they go to the chart. If they want to know even more than that, then they read the article. So try to categorize them as much as possible so you have multiple citations for each category. The same way, you know, if you have 5 articles, if we have 5 articles, even if you're going in the column, you should not have 5 commas or 4 commas, right? Because then all you're still doing is describing the article, right? Find some way to categorize them a little bit more. Whether that is, you know, creating groups by saying, you know, we included, you know, like I said, college age individuals, which some might have been all 20-year-olds, right? But that's obviously in college age, different things like that. The more you can combine them into categories, the easier it will be to read. Other questions on the results section writing? Perfect. So I'm going to take a few minutes now to just describe what we have left, which is remarkably not a lot. I mean, which is good because we don't have a lot of time left either. So once you've written your results section, you then go to what should be the most fun portion of your paper. And that's the discussion. Because the discussion is whatever you really want it to be. You make your points. You argue for what you think you found and why you found that, why you believe that. What'd you go through? You're basically now back to, if the introduction was a few paragraphs, you know, about 3 or so paragraphs. In the discussion, you now pretty much have like 3 to 5 paragraphs to say whatever you want. We will discuss more tips and tricks on how to write that, but that is, you know, the easiest because it gives you the most flexibility. That's the point. As I say, when you're reading research and all that, the discussion is just the author's interpretation of the results. Whether or not the author's interpretation is any better than yours, you know, who knows? But because now you're the author, you get to interpret it and you get to write what you want, which should be relatively easy compared to the high structure. Then we get down into, abstract and title. Abstract is a structured abstract, which basically you're going to take, the most important sentences from each, paragraph and pull them out into the abstract and make it flow a little bit better. That's about it. The title will end up being your basically main finding at the top, and then a colon, a systematic review. And then you have a poster that we will make, and I will show you how to do that as well. But that gives you a lot of flexibility as well, just to add pictures, whatever you want to do. Because oftentimes these are the two main ways that information is disseminated in sports medicine, exercise science, are either through articles or free communications. And free communications are basically just research symposiums, either poster or oral presentations. I don't think I was mean enough to make you guys do an oral presentation. I don't even know if I'm making you guys present your posters, but irrelevant. It doesn't really matter. A poster presentation, you stand there in front of your poster and answer questions. And that's relatively simple, assuming you did the work yourself. So we're really getting close to the end. If you are one of those people that has to have stuff done, or a semester project like a week or two in advance, now is a decent time if you want to start running ahead. You're not going to screw things up as much as, moving forward with results tables and stuff. That's a lot easier to screw up as far as formatting. So if you want to start running ahead, you're more than welcome. And on that same note, then remember that everything needs to be put back into a single document. So if you haven't been doing that, now is also a decent time to start creating that. There are some tips and tricks, but really, if you can get them into, if you can keep it in portrait mode, that'll be better, because that's what most journals are printed in, is portrait mode. So even though your results table may be easier in a horizontal or whatever landscape view, see if you can find a way to get it into portrait. It makes it easier for your single paper, all sorts of different aspects. So we are getting close to the end there. All of that does go back in singular document and does get regraded. So if you haven't been going back and looking at both my feedback as well as your classmates' feedback, do so. Now, when you're looking at my feedback, remember that I'm also seeing your classmates' feedback. So if I agree with what they're saying, I'm not going to add to it. If I disagree with what they're saying, I will probably add my opinion. That does not make my opinion right or wrong. I mean, it really depends on, whether or not it's a grammatical style thing. And, I'm just giving you my preference with that. But, I mean, obviously, if it's a structural thing, hey, you're missing this, make sure you add that. So that way, when it gets regraded for much more points, do pay attention, right? You get the points for turning these in with sufficient effort, right? So just because you're getting 100% on all of them, right? That's what you're getting. That means I see you gave it an effort. The expectation is you're still going to review them, right? So 100% on the method section does not mean that it's ready to plug and play. So that makes sense. I mean, I hope that doesn't sound too dreary, but I was a student once too. You usually get in this habit of figuring out, hey, how much work do I have to do to get the grade? I'm telling you right now, the answer was not a lot to get this first grade. The second grade's more difficult. And in all reality, hopefully, should already be done for you. I am also more than willing to grade these ahead of time, so to speak, and provide feedback along the way. Right? If you go, hey, I'm done, it's not due for a week, can you read over it? That's fine with me too. I can give you feedback as well. You can make any changes, because in all reality, what will occur is I will give you the changes I would like you to make. You will make the changes, and then I will not grade it again. Right? I mean, if you make the changes and stuff that we've asked, as we stated from the very beginning, the goal is everyone to get an A, because everyone has a really good paper. Should not be any surprises in anything going on. So are there any questions about where we are going big picture? I will still kind of give us a roadmap for the next few days, but big picture. Any questions, any thoughts, anything I can give you some relief of anxiety for? Yes. I think the majority of that, most of the heavy lifting stuff will be done before we go online. Some of that is some of the stuff that's left might be like the poster and stuff. It shouldn't be anything too crazy, but let's take a look. So yeah, I did go all sorts of crazy on that. We get through everything, and then we just have some like peer review for your poster for Monday, that first Monday that we're online, and then all this. Do you have to present your poster? Oftentimes I may, like, that's what we do during the every other time, that's what we do during the finals, is people project their poster up and then we talk about it and all that sort of stuff. So we could have you guys record that. Talk into a camera about your poster and all that sort of fun stuff. I mean, that would be good, right? How many points do I give you for your poster overall? Or that's where it would be in the draft of poster, final poster. Oh, what the hell is this reflection paper? Oh, yeah, that's right. Did I describe it already? Oh, it would be in the modules. That doesn't look good. Something tells me a link to your presentation sounds like a YouTube video. What's this? This is, yeah. This is, I took a class this summer and it was all about like changing opinions on things. So it's like describing evidence-based practice, what it means to you, and use the concepts of, oh gosh. That's so touchy-feely.
As someone that has to carry a poster panel pretty far.
Oh no, you build it in PowerPoint, which even if you're printing it, you build it in PowerPoint. Don't ask me why, I have no idea. So you would just project it. Or just send me the PowerPoint slide, and then you would be, so you would like voice over PowerPoint it. But I don't know, do I even like you guys? Nick, do I like these guys? That's not helpful. Let's not do the presentation, because that's relatively easy for me to just manipulate the rubric. And we probably won't do the reflection paper. But I have to pretend like I'm still keeping my rigor up or something. I don't know. Relieve stress. Well, here's the real question. Did you guys, oh, did you guys blah, 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 blah? You got, did you guys decide to become evidence-based clinicians that practice in a patient/client focused manner? Did you learn to value the use of the evidence-based practice model as the foundation of future clinical decision making? And did you get excited about the potential of becoming a contributor to the body of knowledge in their field by successfully completing outcome-oriented research? Check, yeah. Should stop sharing or stop recording and go, yeah, with the only exception of, you know what I always get the lowest marks on my teaching evaluations? Clear objectives. I'm like, I think that's because I'm so flexible in like my style that they go, well, we didn't really know what you really wanted. No, this is what I wanted. These are the objectives. How we get there, different. Clear objectives, flexible methods. There's a difference. So maybe what we'll do is some, like if we have a little bit of time at the end of one of these things, we'll just talk about what those mean, and that will be our 750 word paper about how excited you guys all are. I mean, it's legit. I shouldn't downplay. I mean, those are legitimate things, and I do hope that at the end of this class, you not only have some skills, but a desire to use some of these skills that we gained. I also am all a realist from the standpoint that, in the best of semesters, the main thing students want are grades, right? In COVID land, we really want just grades and get done. So if I had to sacrifice a little bit of that carrying stuff for some stress relief, I'm okay with that, I guess, in 2020. All right, so for the next couple of days, right? So today your results table was due. And if you're running behind, that happens. Let me know. We will make some arrangements and stuff. The goal then is to have our results written by Friday, so we can then peer review them over the weekend. And then we will move on. So there'll be no class on Friday for peer review day. I am also okay if you guys are, because like there's a little, like you can't do the results section without your results table. And there's something in me that's just saying, like I haven't looked at the results tables, but I don't think that they're all done, right? So I'm okay with, if you guys are, without moving the due dates and all that sort of stuff, because that's too much of a pain, doing the like overlap we did that one time, where the results would be due Monday when the peer review was supposed to be due, and then the peer review would be due like Wednesday. But you're then overlapping because we'll be back in class on Monday. So like we're just overlapping, but something tells me in the back of my mind that we could use a couple extra days on the writing the results and can pay that back in the peer review process. Seem like I'm feeling like we're on the same page. All right, so then that is what we will do. The results then will be due Monday, right? Monday, pick a time, let's say before class. I will then assign the peer reviews at that point in time, right? You have to remind me in class Monday to assign the peer reviews, because if it's late, you don't get assigned peer reviews. So Monday, I will assign the peer reviews. We will then do the peer reviews over the next couple of days before Wednesday. On Monday, we will start looking at our discussion and then move to the other sections. We will, like we looked at, we will move faster than things will be due, because I would like to introduce these things now at a much more rapid pace. So I will be introducing things that you may not be ready to work on. And I'm doing that, one, so if somebody is ready, they can, but more importantly, that we can get everything introduced before we leave. All right. So hopefully we're all comfortable with where we are. If not, I am still more than willing to Zoom, whatever we need to, work through it, talk about it. If you're having questions, you're stuck on something, don't sit there stuck in the mud. Let me know and see if I can help facilitate this by either giving you some workarounds or just answering the question for you. All right. This shouldn't be a teach yourself class. If you find yourself teaching yourself a lot of stuff, that's because you're not asking for enough help. All right. Have a great one, and I will see you Monday.
Professor James,
Yes, Rudy.
you just want that paragraph, results paragraph, or do you want the Monday?
So I want the table is due today and the paragraph is due on Monday. The peer review is then due Wednesday.
Okay, got you.
Yep.